So let's get started a little bit with one of those sections of the Scholastic Dishonesty Policy and talk a little bit more about plagiarism. Now, the basic definition of plagiarism is essentially using somebody else's words or their ideas without giving them proper credit. And so in your program, as you're working through it, you're going to be doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, and you're going to incorporate a lot of the information that you find into the papers that you're writing to support your arguments and to provide evidence for the claims that you're making. What citations allow your reader to do is to follow your research so that your reader knows this is where your information is coming from, and it also provides credit to those who produced that research originally. This is just generally what is expected of scholarly practice, and it's expected at all levels within the university. In the College of Nursing, you are going to primarily use the APA style for your writing assignments, and so I would recommend that if you have not already, to purchase the most recent APA manual, and then also work with your faculty to make sure that you have a really good foundation of understanding both how and when to cite using APA. You're going to be using those skills so frequently throughout your program that it's really good to learn that early on. Now, there's going to be two parts to how do you cite something. So you're going to include a list of your references at the very end of your paper that you used. And so generally that's just going to be a list, and you're going to format it to the correct formatting depending upon what type of reference or what type of source it was. The other half that you need is going to be an in-text citation. And so in the body of your paper, you're going to include a parenthetical citation where you are telling the reader this sentence, these sentences, or the ideas contained in this paragraph came from this particular source. And so when you are quoting something directly, meaning you are using the exact words that another author used, you're going to put it in quotation marks, and then you're going to include that in-text citation afterwards. Those quotation marks indicate that those exact words came from this other source. Now, you may choose not to directly quote something, or your instructor may even say, I don't want you to directly quote it, I want you to paraphrase what somebody else has already written. And so then what that means is the words are going to be yours, but the ideas still came from somewhere else. And so you are still going to give credit for where those ideas came from. You don't need the quotation marks because you've determined how to phrase it, but because it's somebody else's ideas, you're still going to have that citation in there. And so some examples of what to cite are going to be statistics, theories, primary sources, research articles, and so as you're paraphrasing, one suggestion that I would give is that it's very hard to paraphrase a single sentence. In many cases, there's only so many ways to rearrange those words. What you really need is to paraphrase either a couple of sentences or a whole paragraph so that you don't run the risk of replicating parts of that just word for word. If it truly only is one sentence that you're trying to incorporate into your paper, I would suggest directly quoting it as opposed to trying to paraphrase it. Now, many students are going to ask, how do I know if something is common knowledge versus whether I have to cite it or not? And the complicated answer is it really can vary. And so your professors will be the first to say that, information that you may cite as a Junior 1 student may be considered common knowledge that you don't need to cite by the time you're a Senior 2. And so it really just depends on where you are. But I would say, when in doubt, cite your source. You are not going to have issues with citing too much to make sure that you're giving credit where that information is coming from. there's a lot of underlying factors that can lead to plagiarism. For some students, it really is as simple as not understanding how or when to cite. And so we just walk through both of those instances. As you get further into your program, I would encourage you to work with your individual faculty, also to make sure that you understand the mechanics of how to cite properly. What I have given you is an overview. One of the other factors that contributes is time management. And it is such a struggle for all of us to be able to balance so many things in our lives. Many of you may have families, one or more jobs, and a lot of other things that compete for your time, in addition to going through a very challenging and in some cases accelerated program. And so being able to manage your time is going to become incredibly important for you, just for your overall success, but also to avoid issues of plagiarism. And so I would encourage you to start to develop habits of starting your papers early. This allows you to be more careful with your writing and your research. It also gives you time to review what you have written so that you can make sure what you are submitting is what you want to submit and that you haven't overlooked something. The other major hurdle or major challenge for students is going to be organization. As you are reading countless articles to try to gather information that you're going to incorporate into your paper, somehow you have to develop a mechanism on how you're going to keep track of where all this information is coming from and what information you got from which specific sources. If you try and wait to the very end when you have finished writing your paper and then you want to go back and put your citations in, it will be near impossible to try to remember which of those pieces of your paper were yours versus which came from another source. And even if you knew that it came from another source, then you got to figure out which source it was. And so it is simply much easier that if you stay organized as you're writing, I would recommend put those citations in your paper immediately. Don't wait until the very end. At the very least, highlight or somehow other denote which sections are coming from which sources so that you're able to match them up at the very end. But if you cite it as you go, then that will take care of itself by the very end. There are a lot of resources available when it comes to writing, to avoiding plagiarism. I mentioned earlier about purchasing the most recent APA manual. In addition to your individual faculty that you'll be working with in your courses, you're going to have coaches potentially within some of those courses that you can go to for questions. The College of Nursing also has dedicated student success coordinators that you can reach out to for help. There's a writing center available in the Central Library on campus. And even though many of you may not necessarily be on campus physically or even in the Arlington area, the Writing Center will also do phone appointments with you. And so that is also still a resource that you can explore and get some more information by looking on their website. Finally, there's other online resources out there. The Writing Center at UTA has a number of online resources that you can look at. A very common one that is used across the country is from the Purdue Online Writing Lab. And so if you Google Purdue OWL, O-W-L, then typically the first link that pops up is going to bring you to their page, and they just have an exhaustive set of examples and instructions on how to cite properly, and a lot of examples from different types of sources as well that you can use as examples.